Hi everyone, this is Yana and you're watching Card a Month video series. Today I want to share several birthday cards and party themed cards with you using new stamps from Winnie Walter and new inks from Snap. This week, Winnie Walter is actually celebrating their first year birthday. They're releasing a bunch of wonderful new products and have a lot of fabulous guests on their blog. I'm excited to be one of their guests and to work with their stamps. So in this video, which is also a part of my monthly Card a Month video series, I'm going to share several birthday cards with you. Now here are the supplies that I plan to use for my first project. I have a large party stamp set with beautiful images including solid and outline balloons in two sizes, little balloon strings, cute little bows, and a bunch of other party related images like party hats, present, and some really fun sentiments too. Next is the fabulous The Big, The Bold, and The Party set with the Winnie Walter signature style bold sentiments. I'm going to be using a birthday sentiment from this set along with a few smaller stamps. Next, I also have the Little Sparkle set, which is actually a free set with a qualifying purchase from Winnie Walter. I'll be using the little sparkly images from here to complement my stamping. And last but not least is the Scenery Stripes set, which I planned to use but ended up not to. I do, however, have another card using this set coming to my blog soon, so stay tuned. As for the inks, I have a new Serenity Colorbox Petal Point ink pad from Snap. This is a high-quality pigment ink, and this is a new set or a new ink pad released by the company just recently. Now, since I plan to make two cards using this design, I also have a different Petal Point ink pad. This is an older one, but with a more feminine colors. I'll be using these for both of my cards, but I'll be only showing you the Serenity ink pad in this video. Next, I also have the Colorbox White Pigment ink, also from Snap, and I'll be using this one to add a few highlights to my stamping. Finally, I have a VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which I'll be using to stamp the sentiments. I'm going to start working on my cards by stamping a word birthday using black ink onto white cardstock. This cardstock is cut to about 4 by 5¼ inches, but I'll be trimming it later to be a bit smaller. Now, the cards that I'm making today are going to have a bit of dimension and pattern paper, but this design can be easily stamped onto a one-layer project. I'm going to stamp one of the sentiments going diagonally from the bottom left to the top right corner, and the other one going simply in the center of my panel. I'm also adding additional little words like happy and from all of us and happy wishes. There are lots of little additional stamps in this set so that you can really come up with some unique sentiments. And you can also mix those with the previous Winnie and Walter sets. As far as I can tell, the font and the font size in those is the same, so this is really nice and convenient. Now it's time to start stamping our balloons. I'm starting with the large balloon first. I'm going to stamp a few of those using various colors from the Serenity ink pad. Like I said, this is pigment ink, and I really like using this type of ink, particularly when stamping see-through objects like balloons. Why, you might ask? Well, because I like the way that pigment ink overlaps. You can see a close-up here. This ink really does give a realistic look of some balloons being in the front and some balloons floating in the back. Pigment ink is also a very rich and creamy ink and works wonderfully with solid images. Dye inks work okay with solid images, but in my experience, pigment inks provide a better coverage, or more solid coverage, if you will. Now, I'm only using colors from this one Petal Point ink pad, and I find it to be very convenient. The colors in this set work great together, and I don't have to spend time trying to figure out a perfect color combo for my project. It has already been done for me. Now that I have my balloons stamped, I'm going to add strings in black and also stamp cute little bows as little accents. Now with this pigment ink, the main sentiment looks like it's floating in between the balloons. Since there is pigment ink in some areas of that sentiment, it really looks like the word birthday is not stamped on top of the balloons or in front of the balloons, but is actually floating in between the balloons. I hope this makes sense to you. Now, to make my balloons a little bit more realistic, I'm going to use this little light highlight image and stamp it in white pigment ink to add highlights to my balloons. You can see this instantly changes the way balloons look and really does make them look more realistic. I'm also going to stamp several little stars in black in 3 areas of my panel to create a visual triangle. These will also define areas where I'll be adding gems to my card. I have to apologize, I'm kind of losing my voice here, so bear with me. So now that this stamped panel is done, I'm going to create a landscape A2 top folding card covered with patterned paper and adhere this panel using foam adhesive. Now note how I'm holding this stamped panel. Because I used pigment ink, which takes a lot longer to dry, I'm holding this panel at the sides. I'm not laying it flat onto my craft mat because the ink might smear this way. So just remember to either let the ink dry first or be careful when handling that stamped panel. We don't want the ink to smear after all of that hard work that we did. To finish this card, I also used my Winko style glitter pen and added a bit of glittery shine to the word birthday. Now again, since everything was stamped in pigment ink, you need to be careful when applying this glitter. I noticed that some images stamped in white weren't completely dry when I was applying glitter, so one of them smeared a bit. I was able to fix that, but I wanted to give you a heads up. You need to either avoid those areas or wait for them to dry. So here's the final look at this card, at this masculine birthday card, and also at the feminine version of this design. I've had some hot tea, so my voice is hopefully a little better now. Let's dive into our second project. I'm going to start by stamping "Every Day is a Party" sentiment from the Party stamp set using black ink. I'm trying to mount this stamp straight onto my clear block using the printed grid lines, as these help a great deal when stamping. Once that is done, I'm going to use the VersaFine Onyx Black ink and stamp my sentiment onto an A2 top folding card base. This one was made using Neenah Solenoid cardstock. I'm trying to position the sentiment in the center of my card, but it can also be stamped on either side for a fun look. Next, I'm using VersaFine Vintage Sepia ink and stamping the outlines of my balloons. I'm going to use rather light colors to stamp the solid parts of the balloons for this card, so I need to make sure that my balloons have some sort of an outline. I could have used black ink for this, the same one that I used to stamp the sentiment, but because I plan to overlap some of the images with the sentiment, I do not want the sentiment to get lost. I want my sentiment to stand out from the background, so this is why I'm using two colors of ink for stamping the sentiment and the outlines of my balloons. While I have that vintage sepia ink out, I'm going to add little bows to my balloons and also stamp the balloon strings. You can see that everything is overlapping a bit. I could have masked my balloons and stamped the strings behind some, but since balloons are rather see-through, I wanted to preserve that low opacity and stamped elements so that they became visible behind each other. I then grabbed my Serenity ink pad and started stamping the inside of the balloons. I used a dark blue ink color for the large balloon and a very light purple for the small ones. To add something to my background and also create a fun party feel to this card, I decided to use a few additional elements from the Party stamp set. To make sure they would blend into the background and would not be too distracting, I once again used very light colors or shades of ink from the Serenity ink pad from Clear Snap. I stamped a few and alternated the colors to make sure they would go well with the colors of the stamped balloons. To give this project a bit of dimension, I stamped a party hat image onto a scrap piece of patterned paper using black ink. I cut it out using my scissors, leaving a tiny border. In order to make that hat look a bit more realistic, I used a fluffy image. I'm not sure what the proper name of that party hat part is. You'll have to excuse me. So I used that fluffy image and stamped it twice. First, I stamped it onto the pattern paper hat, and then one more time directly onto the card base where I wanted that hat to be placed. I then used my foam squares and popped this hat in place onto my card. To finish this project, I adhered a few white sequins going vertically following the flow of my stamped balloons. Okay, I have one more card idea to share with you, and I promise it's a very quick and simple one. So for the final project, I'm going to use 3 colors of ink from a different paddle point ink pad from Clear Snap. I'll be using yellow, orange, and pink. These are fun and vibrant colors, perfect for a party invitation. As for the stamp, I'm using Sugar Rush stamp set, which is just gorgeous. I think I'm actually in love with that top image with the banner girlend. It's the cutest one ever. I'll be sharing another card using this stamp set soon, so stay tuned for that. As for this card, however, I'm going to use a solid banner image, and I'm going to create a simple stamped background or stamped pattern. I love taking a small or a medium-sized stamp and stamping a full background for a card using just one image. The pattern that I want to make today is going to be a diagonal one. You can also do a horizontal or vertical one if you want. All you need for this is a clear block with printed grid lines. If you don't have one like that, you can use a pencil and a ruler, but if you're using a pigment ink, which takes a bit longer to dry, you're better off using a clear block with grid lines, or you'll need to wait until the stamped pattern is completely dry before you can erase any of the pencil lines. Otherwise, the ink might smear. I'm going to start my stamping in the center, and I will work my way out. After I've stamped my first image, I'm going to ink my stamp again using different color of ink and use the grid lines of my clear block to align the images and stamp the second pattern right next to the first one. I have to say, grid lines on a clear block is such a genius invention. I'll be honest with you, I would not be able to do this pattern so quickly if I were to use a simple clear block. I would most definitely have drawn pencil lines to help me with aligning my images, but it's just not the same and a lot more work too. So I kept working on my background and stamping my banners using 3 colors of ink that I selected and ended up creating a fun and vibrant background for my card. I don't think it took me more than 5 or maybe 7 minutes to make it. To stamp the sentiment for this card, I combined 2 images, the banner girlande from the Sugar Rush set and the actual sentiment from the Party set. I used black ink to stamp both to make sure these images would really stand out from my colorful background. With the banner girlande on top of the sentiment, I hope to reinforce the party sentiment, and I have to say I love the way it turned out. As a one final touch for this card, I stamped several stars in black around my sentiment, and that finished my project. Here's one final look at all of the cards featured in this video. Thank you for joining me today. If you're looking for a list of products I used to create these cards, you can find them in the video description and also on my blog. If you're new to my YouTube channel, I would love for you to subscribe. I have new stamping and die cutting videos coming out every week, sometimes even a couple times a week. Until next time, bye!